You're listening to episode 114, How to Talk with Kids About Child Abuse. Hello, my friends. I know this is a heavy topic as soon as you listen to this, but I am telling you that this expert, this woman that we have on the podcast today, is going to give us tangible ways to make this concept not scary and to actually empower kids and their parents. As parents ourselves, this is such important information that we need to know. So bear with me. Also, I'm biased, but this may be the most beautiful, exciting, wonderful, intelligent guest that we've ever had because it is my mom, Jane Donovan, who is a child abuse advocate. And I'm going to quickly get to her story because this is supposed to be a 12-minute talk, and I just want you to leave here feeling confident about how to teach kids about child abuse in a way that makes them feel empowered. So let's get started. Before we jump into the episode, I wanted to let you guys know that if you are a parent, a child life specialist, or professional working with children, you're going to want the hospital or physician's office or urgent care that you take your kids to have the Child Life On-Call app. It is an evidence-based tool designed to empower children and families during medical experiences. And 100% of the child life specialists who have used this app believe that it can help with expanding child life's reach beyond the bedside. And 100% of child life specialists believe it helps parents feel more empowered in their child's care. Learn how to get the Child Life On-Call app for your facility or doctor's office by going to childlifeoncall.com/partners. So why don't you introduce yourself and tell us who your favorite daughter is and what your favorite podcast is?
Okay. My name is Jane Donovan, and I am your mom. And my favorite daughter would be you, not only because you're my only daughter, but because you are my favorite. And my favorite podcast, let me think. I know. Child Life On Call.
Oh, you're so good. You got them all right.
Thank you. Thank you.
So hello, listeners. So, I am a number 2 on the Enneagram, which means I need to be needed. And I would say I get that from you, Mom.
No, you think?
And I would also say that I constantly need words of affirmation. And you just demonstrated that at the beginning of this podcast. So thank you.
You're welcome. I'm always here to do that for you.
So in all seriousness, I wanted to have you on the podcast because you are an expert in the field of child abuse prevention and child abuse advocacy and advocacy centers. And I've known it's been a part of my life for forever, which I think I can give confidence in saying child abuse is a scary and terrifying and upsetting and the worst thing you could ever think of. But because of the way that you have raised me in this ongoing conversation, I'm not scared when we talk about it. And I don't think my kids are either because you started that conversation with Wesley, your grandson, my son, when I think you gave him a child abuse coloring book when he could hold a crayon. So
I think I did.
So why don't you give our listeners a background about how you got into this field and kind of where your passion was born from?
Okay, so this is my only concern. I have to do this in 12 minutes, so I'm going to have to talk really fast.
Well, take your time. Take your time.
Okay.
Well, if it's 12, that's great. If it's 20, that's fine.
Okay, good. I became originally involved with child abuse because of a family event. You were with me. You were 7, and we were at a park in Plano, Texas. Jimmy had baseball practice, and it was Labor Day weekend, 1993. It was wonderful. That was Friday night. And then on Saturday, there were soccer tournaments there. And in the midst of those soccer tournaments, a little girl who was 7 years old, she was 6 months younger than you, was abducted from the park and taken. And it was one of those things that hit me very personally because of you. really, because I recognized that it could have been you that had been taken that day. So fast forward, not to go through the events of that, tragically, that little girl did not survive. But years later, her parents and I are best friends. They are wonderful people. And I will tell you that Ashley Nicola Stell, that little girl, rides on my shoulder and has given me this passion. And I owe all of that really to her. So when that happened, I realized that I needed to take steps to find out how I could prevent that from happening to my children. And that took me to a new project, really, that was a nonprofit project just beginning back in the early 1990s called Children's Advocacy Centers. And a Children's Advocacy Center is a great resource. It is a child-friendly environment that houses all of those responsible for investigating and treating and holding offenders accountable: law enforcement, child protective services, therapy, and objective forensic interviews who actually interview kids to find out what's happened. And so I went and I volunteered. And the very first day I volunteered, I was filing away, back in these days, they were like beta tapes and VCR tapes. So I was actually filing away the tape of a little girl whose forensic interview had been videoed. And when I looked at the name, it was a little girl who was in my son's kindergarten class, who had been in Jimmy's kindergarten class. And so the affirmation that gave to me that I was in the right place, doing the right thing, just kind of launched me into, for the next really 30 years, being involved with children's advocacy centers, trying to educate the community about the issue, which is scary, but doesn't have to be scary, and trying to empower children so that they have the information that they need to stay safe. Not at all abdicating the fact that it is our responsibility as adults to protect children. It's not their responsibility to protect themselves, but we can provide them with tools that help empower them and help them understand what personal boundaries are, and give that information so that they can kind of look at the world in a way that helps them be safe.
You know, hearing you talk about the story about Jimmy's kindergarten. Jimmy is my brother, single, for any of you ladies here in the Austin area.
Yes, reaffirming that. He is single. He's very cute. Anybody?
Loves sports, does play video games,
sports,
you know.
Loves family.
Has a cute dog.
Has a really cute dog. Maybe we could change the subject of this podcast, or maybe we could do another one.
Let's do a bachelor version for Jimmy.
Okay.
But hearing you talk about that, I feel like that I've known that about your experience, but putting it into perspective now, like Wesley being in first grade, it's just, you know, totally different when you have your own kids, which is kind of what you've always taught me. And I also want to say, I'm so grateful for the example that you've shown me, you know, since we were younger. Like we didn't really talk about what we wanted to be when we grew up. You would always say, we just have to make the world a better place. You know, I don't remember it being like, oh, I want to be a ballerina, or I want to be this or that. Like, I just remember it being like, our job is to make the world a better place. Like, figure out how you're going to do that.
Oh, thanks. Thanks, Katie.
So since the topic is how to talk to kids about child abuse, in a way that is not scary. And I think as child life specialists and parents of kids that have medical issues or diagnoses, we're really good actually at, you know, figuring out how do we make this educational? How do we let them know that this is important, but let them know there's a safety net? And you have done an incredible job in education, especially in young children, with your puppet program. So kind of walk us through what you developed for the Advocacy Center in Collin County, and how you recommend adults talk to kids about child abuse.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. I would love to. I worked at the advocacy. I volunteered at the center, and then I literally worked there for 10 years. And my job was to handle educating the community. And so I tell everybody I took a teeny tiny shovel and I dug a teeny tiny hole that's gotten bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger through the years. And now I think that child abuse awareness is really taken off, and people are understanding that it is a public health epidemic and that we can help our kids stay safe, and that it's up to us to make that difference. But I also, at the same time, felt a need to empower kids in a way that wasn't frightening. And I had the opportunity through a benefactor of the Advocacy Center and also a program in New York City called CAP, Child Abuse Prevention Program. The benefactor flew a group of folks from New York to Plano, Texas, and they brought a puppet program, and it was called Banraku Puppetry. It was a Japanese-style puppetry where they used life-size puppets to perform for kindergarten, first grade. Actually, I think they went all the way up to the fourth grade, but they were clinicians that were offering this program. And they had an opportunity to actually ask children after their performance to come up and speak with them if they chose. And the goal was for a child to have an opportunity in a safe space to disclose. I was just taken aback by that. But the problem for me is I am not a clinician like you and your child life specialist. I haven't gone through any specific training or licensure. So what I wanted to do was create something that I called edutainment. And edutainment is something where you are educating kids while you're entertaining them. And the edutainment program I created was called the Kids Count Players. And they are puppets that look a lot like the Muppets. And so we have a little girl and a little boy and another little girl, and then we have a teacher and we have a police officer and we have a puppy. And so one morning your dad and I were running, and I'm trying to figure out, what am I going to name these puppets?
Hold on. Well, are you saying that you and Dad left me and Jimmy at home alone?
Well, yes, I think we did.
Okay.
Yes.
I was probably in the 8th grade, so it's fine.
Okay. Thank you, Katie.
Good. You're welcome.
You're scaring me with that. But anyway,
Okay.
So Dad and I go out for a run, and I'm trying to figure out what to name these puppets. And your dad had this endearing name for you, which was?
Peanut Butter.
It was Peanut. It was Peanut. It was just Peanut. You weren't Peanut Butter. You were just Peanut.
I was Peanut Butter. Hey, Peanut Butter.
No, you weren't. You were Peanut, and then your best friend was Butter.
No, she was Jelly.
Okay. All right.
Okay,
Whatever you say. Anyway,
let's call him in.
Okay. All right. Let's call him in.
Just kidding.
Nonetheless, so we named this little girl Peanut, and we named little boy Butter, and we named their best friend Jelly. Mm-hmm. And then our teacher was Miss B. Strong. And we included a teacher because if I could show you a pie chart as to whom most children disclose, the largest piece of the pie is to teachers. That is generally to whom the person that a child feels safe and discloses to teachers. So I knew I wanted a teacher. And then, of course, law enforcement is important because they are out investigating and holding offenders accountable. So we named our police officer, Officer Do Right. And, every little girl and boy needs a puppy. So we had a puppy, and the puppy was Amigo. And we created music to go with it. And I found 25 wonderful volunteers who were willing to go out with me. And we performed for kindergarten, first and second grade students. Parents were welcome and invited if they wanted to come. And we had a wonderful, friendly, fun program that lasted 30 minutes where we gave kids information about abuse. So we talked about the different types of abuses, but of course, in our culture today, the word sex has a connotation that is just ridiculous, right? And so I knew I couldn't get into the schools if I was going to talk about sexual abuse. So we kind of rewrote that and talked about different kinds of touches. And that was accommodated by teachers and counselors. And we performed while I was there, we did that. We started that program in about 2005. And when I left to move to Austin to be closer to my children and my grandchildren, we had performed for about 175,000 students. And so walking away for that program was hard for me. I would not give that up if the alternative was not being close to you guys. But that program's still going. It just started again after the pandemic, which is so flippin' cool. But we have a lot of anecdotal resource materials that we've created a child safety sheet, a parent's guide to how they keep their kids safe, and all of it with music that is just so cool. So not scary, not scary.
So let's talk about what you mentioned good touch, bad touch. I know the program talks about an uh-oh feeling in your tummy. You talk about the hula hoop. Tell us about some of those things so people can walk away and know what to say.
Well, what we did, we actually, the program and the dialogue that we used was approved by the therapy director at the advocacy center. And so one of the things that we ended up not using actually was the word bad touch, because to say bad to a child, that child might take that on. So what we did is we talked about good touches, and we gave examples of those, like, hugs and handshakes. And then we talked about confusing touches. And a confusing touch is the thing that gives a child an uh-oh feeling in their tummy. And then we did talk about physical abuse and emotional abuse that kids would understand in a way that, it's their parents' job to keep them safe. One of the most important messages, there's so many important messages, but one of the messages that's really important for us to give to our children is permission to tell an adult. And, that is so important, even for little kids. It is important for a parent to sit down with their child and agree together, who are those 3, 4, 5 adults in your world that you both feel safe to tell. I came to this conclusion when I watched the forensic interview of a 14-year-old little girl, 14-year-old teen, who had been sexually abused by someone close to her. And in that interview, she was asked, "Why didn't you tell your mom?" And her response was just an epiphany for me. She said, "I couldn't tell my mom because if I told my mom, it would have killed me." And then when we asked Mom said, she tells me everything. I don't know why she couldn't tell me that, but she couldn't. So that to me translates to, who could you tell? Because what you do is you give a child permission to tell. And number 2, you know who they're going to tell. So that's a big part of the program for little kids, for teens. The hula hoop is a fun thing to use. We call it circles around me. And the example is you stand inside a hula hoop. And inside that hula hoop, that is your personal space. And nobody has the right to come inside that space unless you give them permission to do that. And if they do come inside your personal space, you get to hold up your hand and say, "No, stop." One of the mistakes that we make as parents is that we, through wanting our children to respect other adults, insinuate to our child that, they have to sit on Uncle Joey's lap, or they have to kiss Aunt Mary goodbye. And no, they don't. They don't have to do any of that. And it's not disrespectful to tell someone that you don't want to sit on their lap, that you don't want them to give you a kiss, you don't want them to give you a hug. And so the hula hoop for a little kid inside of that kind of explains that's your space. And then, of course, everybody knows about the bathing suit, because the bathing suit covers our private parts, and those are the parts that are personal space for us that no one has the right to touch without our permission. So that's kind of what we do to educate the kids in a way that hopefully they get it. And the alternative, the other side of that, the reverse of that, is I have had parents say to me, "My kid invades other kids' space. How do I prevent my child from going into another kid's personal space?" And I said, "Get 2 hula hoops, and you stand inside of one, and the other kid stands inside one, and the 2 hoops should not cross." Right. So it's a good example for a lot of different reasons.
It's the visual that a lot of kids need. We see that in child life when we're explaining cancer, or we're, if you can visualize something, it's easier to digest and process for a child. We are sponsored by Magic Mind. I am such a coffee person. I enjoy the taste and the smell in my morning routine. But the truth is, I go beyond that 1 cup of Morning Joe, and my 2 to 3 day cup habit is expensive and not that effective in the long run.
Thankfully, Magic Mind has come into my life. It's a small green shot-sized drink of all natural ingredients like adaptogens to decrease stress, nootropics to boost blood flow and cognition, and unlike regular energy drinks, Magic Mind has minimal caffeine, all of which comes from matcha. After a few days in a row of drinking Magic Mind, I notice I have less brain fog and feel more productive without an afternoon slump. You can try it and get 20% off Magic Mind by going to magicmind.co/childlife and using code CHILDLIFE.
If you are looking for a way to make a child in your life smile, then you have to go to smilemakers.com and go through all of the must-have toys, stickers, and prizes for kids. You'll find everything you need to make the hospital, waiting room, or even your own living room more fun with games, crafts, and prizes for every occasion. I also have very good news for you because when you go to smilemakers.com and type in OnCall20, you will get 20% off with no minimum order required. So stock up on bundles made specifically for hospital procedures and therapeutic play and make these already very affordable items more affordable with OnCall20. That's smilemakers.com and OnCall20 for 20% off your entire order.
Tell us a little bit about what, after this puppet program, would perform in a school. What would you hear back from the counselors? What was the feedback from students?
Oh gosh, it was awesome. We actually had one specific school that I just vividly remember where we were performing. When I got back to the center, when I got back to work, a counselor called me and told me that a child had actually come up to her during the performance and disclosed. So what the program did was not only educate kids, it created an opportunity for a counselor to have the door open for a child to come see them. And counselors loved the program. Teachers loved the program. Mm-hmm. It was also an opportunity for counselors and teachers to, have 45 minutes where they didn't have to be in charge. And so they always really liked that too.
Yeah, of course. Wow. It's so impressive that you built this and that it continues on, from 2005 to now. And another piece of this puzzle that, you and I both wanted to talk about was the issue and the role that adults play in children's life. And I love that you said, we can empower kids, but ultimately it is our responsibility. And I would say if it hadn't been for you, I wouldn't have disclosed abuse a few times not disclosed my abuse, but mandated reporting as I needed to about child abuse within the hospital setting. A few feelings that I got from my interaction with a child or a family that didn't feel right. And I questioned myself a little bit and would maybe talk to, for one specific case was a surgeon, who I really trusted. And he didn't say, no, don't go report, but he's like, I don't see that. If you want to report, that's fine. But so it really is up to us as adults. We don't need approval from other people to report. You don't have to get your social worker's permission to report. It's great if you can, work together, but it is our job and a legal responsibility to do so. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I can. And by the way, I'm so proud of you because I know that we've talked about a couple of situations that were uncomfortable. And the reality is that reporting abuse to the hotline, which is 1-800-252-5400, I tell people if I could tattoo it on their arm, I would.
You would get a tattoo?
Maybe not. Never mind. Let's change that. No, but okay. It needs to be somewhere, or you can just memorize it like I have, 1-800-252-5400. Now, maybe, I don't know, maybe your husband would like to have that number tattooed. I don't know, but that's, that's like, we'll do that.
It's because he likes tattoos. Okay.
He does. He likes tattoos. But here is what is important for everybody to know. It is really, really hard to report suspected abuse. I've done it, and it's hard for me. It is hard. It is not an easy thing to do because what you do is second guess yourself and say, what if I am wrong? What if I disrupt this family? And you know what? If you are wrong, there will be an investigation, and let that family come to you and feel vindicated because you were wrong. But if you don't report and you are right, what you do is you leave that child vulnerable to who knows what. So we just can't let that happen. We can't let that happen. And I know child life specialists don't want that to happen because that's your passion. I mean, our passion is the same. It's keeping kids safe, giving them safe space, protecting them. But yes, the law requires us, every adult, to report suspected abuse, and those who are licensed to work with children are actually mandated reporters.
And I think one point is that you can anonymously report as well. Yes, you don't have to give your name. But I will agree. I've gone through the process, and every time I'm like, what? Because they ask you some pretty directed questions. And it's like, well, no, I'm not sure. You know, you're going on a hunch, but it's not our job to be sure. It's our job to report something we suspect. It's not something we absolutely know for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So if you could empower parents with one piece of advice before they enter this conversation with their child, what would it be?
I think it doesn't, I guess what I would say, Katie, is it doesn't have to be a conversation, right? It doesn't have to be, okay, sit down with me and we are going to talk about keeping you safe and abuse. It doesn't have to be a conversation. It is a fluid conversation. People say to me often, you know, well, my child is too young. No, your child is not too young to understand the names of their body parts. I mean, no kid is too, I hope I can say this, but you know, an arm is an arm, a penis is a penis, a vagina is a vagina, a foot is a foot. And so, you know, to give another name to a body part of a child makes a kid think, well, we're not calling it an arm, you know, or we're calling it something else. So that must mean this is not right, or that this is something scary. So I think the conversation is fluid, and it is, you talk about being inside a hula hoop, you talk about boundaries. You know, your babies come over here and they go to the bathroom and they say, Nana, I need my privacy. I need my privacy. And it makes me so proud because I know you taught them that. And that's not a conversation that you sat down and said, well, when you go to the bathroom, it's right. It's because it was a natural conversation. And so I guess, you know, my one piece of advice for parents or anyone, make it a fluid conversation. Don't make it the conversation, because then it becomes uncomfortable. But I will also say that there are things as an adult that you can do to keep your kids safe. You know, I think probably the most important thing that I would tell parents to keep their kids safe is to not allow a child to be in an isolated situation alone with an adult. I'm going to say 70% of, or even 80% of cases that happen because of happenstance that has led a child and an adult into a space alone. And, you know, I had someone say to me one time, well, you know, my kid goes to see, you know, the preacher, and they talk about spirituality. And I'm like, well, that's great. They don't need to go into a room and shut the door to do that, right? They can sit outside on the playground and do that. When we let our kids be in those situations, whether it's an overnight stay, whether it's a camping trip, whether it's a soccer lesson, whether it's somebody picking up your kid, make sure that is not going to be a circumstance where that kid is by themselves. So that's probably one thing. The other thing is to hold youth-serving organizations accountable. You know, I always say that what takes change is when we have a revolution that impacts people's pocketbooks. And if you want to send your kid to camp, you know, you go and you make sure, do you do background checks on your staff and volunteers? Do you have them go through training? Do they know how to report? And if they don't have answers for those things, go somewhere else. So I think those, in addition to talking to your kids, are some of the things that are important. You know, I remember with you and Jimmy, when I think about this now, it just makes me, I feel so guilty. I mean, I made you guys go to piano lessons and I didn't come in with you.
Mrs. Breitling.
I let you go in.
Don't worry. It was pure torture, but not because of abuse. That lady smelled so badly.
Oh, gosh. At any rate, if I had it to do over, I would have done it differently. I would have come in and listened.
Yeah. But I think that's good. I think, you know, what you're saying is what has happened, moving forward. These are the things
Right.
to look out for. I love your suggestion about because I want my kids to have trusted relationships with adults outside of, Preston and I. We have
Right.
dear friends who they love and they call family, but that doesn't mean they have to be alone in a room playing video games together.
Right.
That's not a situation I'm going to put them in. And it doesn't mean that I don't love and trust my friends. It's just, if I can
Of course.
avoid that, we'll do that.
Right. That's smart.
Well, thank you so much for being here, for explaining all of this. You make it so digestible. So just to recap the things, right? It's an ongoing conversation. There's good touches and then there's confusing touches. A confusing touch gives you that uh-oh feeling in your belly. Who are your close adults that you feel comfortable disclosing to? We talk about that a lot in healthcare, who not necessarily disclosing abuse, but when you're feeling sad, you're feeling overwhelmed, who are the people you talk to? And then asking questions as parents to the organizations that we are sending our kids and participating in.
Right.
And if people want to watch the cute little Kids Count players on YouTube, they can go do that. And maybe I'll link it on Instagram, but this has been so helpful.
That'd be awesome. And the other thing, Katie, is that I have what I consider a great refrigerator piece. It has on one side, and I sent it to you as a resource. It has my safety sheet, and it's kind of what you sit down and talk with your kids about. And it also provides room for you to write down those people that you trust. And then on the back, it provides an opportunity for parents or caregivers what to do, how to talk to your kids, have a plan, and those questions that you can ask you serving organizations. So I feel like it's kind of a one-sheet thing. Put it on your fridge. Don't have to think about it until the time comes, and then look at it and have your kids look at it.
I love it. Well, so proud you're my mom.
I'm so proud that you're my daughter, and I love you so much. And you are just amazing, and your people are amazing, and what you have accomplished is amazing. And I have people all the time say to me, you must be so proud, and I am.
Well, I feel the same way about you. And if there are child life specialists in advocacy centers who are listening to this, I know there are some. My mom would be a great person to connect with about getting the Kids Count players to your service. I mean, how cool would that be?
That would be cool. I'm in Austin now. I'm not up there. But yes, I do have my volunteers who said that they would come down and do performances down here. So sure, absolutely.
All right. Thanks, Mom.
Thanks, Katie. Love you.
Love you.
Thank you for listening to the Child Life On Call podcast. I'm your host, Katie Taylor, and you can follow us at Child Life On Call on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Please rate and review to make it easier for other families to find us. We have cute merch available at www.bonfire.com/store/childlifeoncall, and you can listen to more episodes and find resources at childlifepodcast.com.